Frostgrave, Fantasy Wargames in the Frozen City. This is a set of miniatures rules for fantasy wargaming at the skirmish level, published by Osprey. Osprey is a publisher that is famous for their very good books about military history. I hadn't even realized that they also published wargame rules, but I'm glad they did. So that when I went to Gen Con, I had a look at their offer, and I saw a new game that was being released there, Frostgrave again. It comes with a hardcover book, which is very good looking. This is not just any set of rules that comes out of your printer. The production values are very high. Excellent quality of the paper, illustrations, pictures, fantasy art, impressive fantasy art. And again, pretty solid product. The story in Frostgrave, players, usually 2 players, control warbands that are led by a main wizard, or in any case somebody who knows spells. There are various schools of magic here, from necromancer, chronomancer, sigillist, elementalist, witch, soothsayer, and so on and so forth. Very often, I would say pretty much standard procedure is that you also assign an apprentice to your wizard. So there is another character in the game that knows the same spells as the wizard. He or she is learning from the wizard after all, so knows the stuff that the wizard teaches. And then, but is a little less good at casting the spells that the main wizard knows. And then together with the wizard and the apprentice, there is a group of other soldiers, which you form at the beginning of the game, spending gold to hire your soldiers. It can be thieves, barbarians, knights, average soldiers, archer, crossbowman. There is a large variety of people that you can recruit. You can build then terrain. The idea is that there's this frozen city full of treasures and magical artifacts, and now that the weather is a little bit better, winter is not there yet, spring is coming, so then the wizards have decided to start exploring it. But these wizards are very competitive, so when another warband of wizards is out there looking for treasures, they don't just decide to split the loot or to split the city in different areas. They just fight to grab as many treasures as they can. So in a standard scenario, pretty much you're going in the frozen ruined city, fighting against the opponents and trying to take treasures from the board that will be represented by tokens or miniatures that you have representing treasures, and you're trying to bring them out of the city. Now, the rulebook is pretty thick, but most of it is stats about monsters, animals that may be in there. Rules for campaigns, so how you acquire objects as you go, how you acquire experience, how you gain new stuff from adventure to adventure. You have scenarios. Here we're looking at the section about the scenarios, and then you have, very important, the magic. So you have a lot of spells to choose from, following certain rules, given that wizards belonging to certain schools will be more able, more effective when casting certain types of spells than others. Then you have, here's the rules for the campaign. And basically, when it comes to the main game, it's not too many pages. It's a pretty simple, straightforward game. Actually, yeah, playing the game is basically all you need to really play the game, from page 26 to 47, and several pages or pages that are full of illustrations also with the pages that have text. Pretty simple, basic, and straightforward. Of course, you need to form your band first. So actually, there are a couple of rules before in which you're forming your band. First, you need to choose the school of magic that you have, that you want to embrace, that your main wizard will follow. And here you have a description in a section about the schools of magic, a description of each school, and then the schools that school is aligned with, neutral towards, and opposed to. This is very important because if you're a chronomancer, you will not just get spells for chronomancers. You will get some from chronomancers using books, and you will be very good at casting them. You'll be particularly effective when you cast them, but then you also will acquire some spells from your aligned schools and from your neutral schools. You'll just be less effective because you will have a penalty of -2 when casting spells from your aligned schools and +4. I'll explain later how those penalties work, but the idea is that simply it's a little harder for you to cast those spells. But every wizard that enters the game will have a selection of spells coming from different schools, some with the best stats, their own, and some with a little less good stats. The Elementalist, you know the Elementalist, they summon balls of fire, walls of water, make stuff explode. They're just the most, the ones that the most resemble Hollywood, the special effects specialists. The Enchanter manipulates energy and usually gives energy to stuff, so they can improve weapons and magical items. The Illusionist, pretty much as the name says, they are pretty devious. They manipulate light, they manipulate the appearance of things, so they're pretty fun to play. Necromancer, I think we all know the kind of stuff that they do. Sigillist, this is a school of magic that I haven't seen in other fantasy sources. They manipulate the writing, reading, and language. The idea is that they know the pattern, the secrets patterns of verbal expression. They sound like linguists more than anything. They have magic runes that they draw, and they affect the way other spells work mainly. Frankly, they're not my favorite school. The Soothsayers, they can gain access to different forms of knowledge, as it says here. They can extend their senses beyond their body, including through time itself, so that kind of thing. Summoner, they summon creatures of various kinds. Thaumaturge, the good people that heal, and they can manipulate positive energy, that kind of thing. The Witch, that interacts with nature, and, well, that's it. The Witch brews potions, so does that kind of stuff. Now, important, once you have this, as I said, you'll need to choose your spells from the Book of Magic. Now, the Book of Magic that you have here, sure, with detailed explanation of what the spells are, it's really good reference, but the spells are organized in alphabetical order. And this is not the best way of organizing information, because you will need to choose spells based on the school. When you're selecting your spells, these spells come from your Wizard School of Magic, one from each of the 3 aligned schools, and 2 from the neutral schools. Which means, if I'm going through this alphabetically, it's hard for me to figure out which ones are the ones that belong to me. Well, I would have to read them all. It would be good to have a section in which the spells are organized by School of Magic instead of by letter. Luckily enough, such a thing is in the book, and it is at the end of the book. You have the cards with summaries about the spells, and here, when I'm creating an Elementalist, I look at the Elementalist spell, then I say, okay, the Elementalist also will get some spells from that other school, and then I simply look at that other school. Basically, I haven't used this section much. I have used the cards almost always, because you really need to know the spells by school. So you create your wizard and you give them magic. You also give them weapons. Usually their weapon of choice is the staff, which is not a great weapon to attack, but it grants you some defensive abilities. Then you assign stats to your wizard, and the stats are, where the heck are, there you go. Oh, there's the apprentice. And the stats for the wizards are here. And that also will tell you the stats in general in the game. M, movement, you move up to that amount of inches each turn, or I should say each time that you use a move action. Fight in combat, but also you use it somehow to dodge bullets, to dodge missile weapons. And this is a stat that you also use in melee combat. Shooting, a bonus for shooting. Armor, will which you use when you're trying to resist the spells, when you're taking will tests and health. When you goes down to 0, your character is out of the game. The apprentice also has stats which are based on that of the main wizard, but they're a little lower. And then you purchase, or I should say you hire people to create your bands, and you can get them from here. Here are their stats, and here are the things that come with them, the equipment that they have. Super important is the cost. You have a couple of 100 coins that you can spend to form your band. You can hire up to 8 soldiers. So that means you may buy 2 knights, which are super powerful, or like a knight and a marksman, super high quality, but then you will not have many people in your band because you will not have much money left to hire other people. Or you'll have some excellent people and then some really low quality thugs and thieves. Or you can have combination of more middle of the road, average quality, reliable people like that. The average archer, the average crossbowman, and the average infantryman. Makes sense. Large bands of excellent and worse, or large bands more towards the average. As I said, then you play the game. During a turn, you roll to determine initiative, and then you activate your characters. Actually, you know what? As we move on to the turn, let's have a look at the board, or a board, one of the many possible boards. It is ideal if you can figure out a terrain that will give you the feeling of winter, half a frozen city. Otherwise, anything really works, frankly. If instead of Frostgrave, you want to call it Greengrave, nothing prevents you from retheming the game that way. What you see here is a paper map that I made. I used a file purchased on Wargame Vault, which is a website where you can download material for wargaming. This map in particular is a map by the publisher Heroic Maps. This one is called Wyvern Hall Fort or Wyvern Pass. I remember Wyvern is in the name. All I did simply was to print the map, which is several maps, cut them and paste them on a foam board that I bought at Staples or CVS. I don't even remember, for like $5 or $6. That's all it takes, and the file costs maybe $3. That's really all it takes to make a map, which is this. Good looking, in my humble opinion. Here I had some extra space, so actually I also pasted some maps, again from Heroic Maps. This is a different set. This is Evil Shrines, I seem to remember. So I have a cave full of bones, a cave with skulls. And if I want to activate those, if I want to make them part of the game, all that I need to do is simply to place tokens, say a token here and a token here, to indicate that there's a secret passage here. When you get here, you can pop out here, and maybe a different token for another secret passage. So it's very simple to connect the underground with the above ground. Now, as I said, this is an example of a terrain that does fit thematically. If you can find that, well, I don't know, but there are several options. Again, I'll show you some other maps as we are here. These are all by Heroic Maps. This is a fort, Winter Fort by Heroic Maps, with a section from another set by Heroic Maps. Definitely my favorite publisher for paper maps. This is from Wilderness Encounters. And here another map, again for winter fighting. This is called, I remember the name of this one, Winter Gate. So you have kind of like a city here, again with a wintry feeling. Suggestions on how to create a cheap and good looking effective terrain for Frostgrave. Back to Frostgrave. Now, here we have 2 warbands that I built that are facing each other. What is missing here, what I haven't placed, is treasures. There will be tokens on the board representing treasures. You can also play a simpler scenario which players are just attacking each other like crazy. But there will and should be treasures on the map. I'm just dumping some random treasures there. The players will fight to acquire. You roll for initiative, and then each player first activates their wizard. Suppose that this is the wizard for this band, and the wizard activates and also can activate up to 3 friendly miniatures that are within 3 inches from the wizard. Then the opponent will do the same, activating their wizard, which in this scenario here is that dark elf with the staff. The dark elf also, the wizard of the opponent also activates up to 3 miniatures. Then the apprentice of the previous side activates. Here's the apprentice, and then the apprentice can activate other figures. The apprentice of the opponent does the same. We go back to the original team, in which now the soldiers that have not activated yet, maybe because they were scattered on the board, or you simply wanted to save their activation for later, like this guy, then they get to act, and finally the opponent gets to activate all their soldiers that had not activated yet. Now, when you activate a miniature, the miniature can take up to 2 actions. If you want to take 2 actions, one has to be movement. The other one can be another movement, can be attacking, can be launching a range attack, can be picking up a treasure, and can be casting a spell, of course. This is a game of wizards. But one of the 2 things has to be movement. When you take your move action, simply you measure on the board and you move up to the movement allowance of your figure. For example, this guy moves up to 6 inches. Depending on terrain, things may happen. There are rules for difficult terrain, rough terrain, there are rules for jumping and things like that. But you move, and then you perform another action, which again can be cast a spell, do a bunch of things. Casting a spell. Spells, there are a lot. I can't get in detail, from healing people, improving armor, charging the weapons of your people with energy, summoning monsters, walls of fire, making people in your band glow so they're harder to hit with range attacks. The variety of spells that you can cast is too large for me to cover. But the idea of how you cast spells is always the same. You roll a d20. This is a game with d20s. We don't see many of those in war games these days. You roll a d20 and you're trying to match or exceed the base casting number of each spell. Each spell does come with a casting cost, which is increased if the spell is not from your school. For example, you're trying to create an elemental ball, then the base cost is 12. If you were from another school trying to cast this, if the school is aligned with you, you have a slightly higher number. If it's neutral, considerably higher number. You roll a d20 when your action is to cast a spell. You declare the spell, roll the d20, add the modifier that you may have from various sources, and see if you have met that cost or that casting number or not. If you haven't, you can choose to empower the spell, which is you spend health points, pretty tricky and dangerous, but you spend health points to increase your roll on a 1-to-1 base. I missed casting the spell by 1. I can spend a health point to reach that. I can also choose to improve a roll that I already passed, simply to make the total higher, because in some cases a higher casting number will make the spell more powerful. For example, in case of spells that the opponent can try to resist, taking a will test, then they are testing against the total casting number at the end of all the modifications, so that is another thing. This is why you may want sometimes to boost your number, even if you already had enough. If you manage to cast your spell effectively, you resolve one of the dozens of possible effects that these spells may generate. If you are fighting in melee, then both players roll a d20. Both players add both miniatures involved add their fighting skill, and you see what the total is, and the player with the highest total inflicts a hit on the opponent, delivers damage, and does not take damage. If the total is exactly the same, then both players hit at the same time, both models hit at the same time, both players take damage. There are modifiers involved, again, based on the magic that may be in play at that point, based on the weapons that are used, and based on supporting characters. If you have a member of your band which is engaged with the enemy you're attacking and not with anybody else, then the character is supporting you, and also the character gives you a bonus. Other thing is that when you're in contact, it is still an action to attack. So you move, spend action to move, and you spend another action to attack. You don't resolve melee automatically. So when you've determined whether or not damage is inflicted, when you inflict damage on somebody, you take the total rolled and inflicted damage, suppose 16, and after a bunch of modifiers is 19. Then you take that as the fight number, you subtract the armor of the opponent, and what is left is the number of hits that the opponent takes. Suppose that guy has an armor of 11, the total damage was 19, 19 minus 11 is 8, 8 points of damage given to that guy. And if the guy went down to 0, then the guy is out of the game. Super simple that way. And for range combat, here we have an archer. For range combat, well, you need to be within range and have line of sight. You fire against the opponent, but it works pretty much in the same way, just that you roll your d20 and you add your shoot modifier, your modifier for shooting in range combat. The opponent still rolls with fighting skills, and sometimes that to me is a little weird. Sometimes you may have a character which is invisible. The character is on the other side of the board, loses the invisibility shield when firing. So just comes out of invisibility, shoots from the other side of the board as this character is facing another direction, and yet this character has ability to dodge still and influenced by fighting. That was something that seemed a little strange, but that's how it works. You compare d20 plus shooting with d20 plus fighting. If the shooting is higher, it inflicted damage. If the fighting, the roll of the target is higher, nothing happens because that was a miss. You can shoot in melee, which you don't always, you're not always able to do in games, but if you're shooting a melee where your friends are involved, there's a chance that you will hit them. But I like the fact that you do have the option. You can spend an action to grab a treasure, but from that moment on, well, great that the treasure moves with you, but you have a penalty when fighting, and you move at half your speed. These treasures are darn heavy. It's not like a small amulet or stuff like that. Because moving at half the speed is quite punishing. It does add to the tactical interest of the situation because, well, you have to protect the people that are crawling away from the city with the treasures to score them at the end of the game. But it can be pretty tough that way. In a nutshell, well, I've been talking for 20 minutes, so maybe it's not that small of a nutshell. It's a pretty big, maybe it's like in a coconut, this is how Frostgrave works. I like it. I like it quite a bit. I think it could have been made a little more user-friendly in a variety of ways. For example, by giving you starting warbands, so your quick starting rules. So simply, they give you examples of an average elementalist warband, a good soothsayer warband, and go with it. So players can just jump into it, get familiar with some of the spells, and get to learn as they play. The game is not too hard, but it's just that the first game you will easily be overwhelmed by the number of spells that you have to kind of know or be familiar with. I recommend the players prepare the warbands before they get together, because otherwise setting up the game in the sense of setting up your warband can take quite a bit. They can be part of the fun, I guess, but it can take quite a bit. So before you create an effective warband, it takes some work logistically, and again, before you become familiar and you really create an effective warband, it will take even longer. That's one thing that concerns me a little bit. Sometimes then there may be warbands, I guess, that are created and they're more powerful than the others because the selection of spells is much more effective, and there, of course, you have cases where the meta game, the pre-game, may take the lion's share, and that to me is never all that good. I wish there had been standard warbands that you can use that are already balanced and you can just put on the table without too much thinking. That is the only thing, really. Other than that, minor things in the organization of the book, like the main rules about spells being organized alphabetically instead of by school, things like that. But overall, per se, the game is solid and fun. The game has a lot of tactical options. Even too many in a sense for the starting player, a little overwhelming. But once you get familiar with the 16 or so spells that will be in play in a game, then things will move quickly. Definitely the action is pretty fast and intense, although I was a little bit worried with a player activating for card turns, then the other player that a band may get too much momentum and slam into the opponent and create too much damage. But actually that doesn't seem to happen, especially because you should work to prevent that beforehand, before the clash happens. So you start by casting defensive spells or other types of spells that will improve your chances of delivering damage or not taking too much damage when the opponent attacks. So I actually found that that was not too much of a problem. Something that worried me, and again turned out not to be a problem, is that I was afraid there would be like large clatters of figures fighting together, that it could become like a black hole where simply players dump in more and more figures for ridiculous and insane melees. That wasn't the case, being the main point to retrieve the treasures rather than just to slaughter the opponents. So they're finding the balance of how to use your forces so that you can fight and defend while some of your people are busy doing other stuff and carrying away the treasures. That is part of the fun, and definitely makes the action more interesting than if it just was arena bloodbath. Frostgrave, the first set of rules that I try from Osprey. I'm definitely pleased with the quality of the product at all levels. The product is a game, the product as a book. Minor things here and there that maybe could have made the game better, but as is, there's a pretty fun and exciting set of miniatures rules for fantasy wargaming. Definitely, I'm pleased with this set of miniature rules.